Thank you very much for joining us right here on PM News. Let's now take a look at what happened in the world of business since January. 2014 had a mixture of memorable events, with workers striking, the country's economy taking a hit with downgrades, load shedding rearing its head, and business leaders going in and others stepping down. The year had its own ups and downs. So this is how it unfolded. It became the longest strike in the history of South Africa, and one that shook the mining sector to its core. The Association of Mine and Construction Workers led its 100,000 members in the platinum sector on a 5-month-long strike in January to press their demand of 12,500 rands a month. A period of intense negotiations followed, which saw the affected platinum miners, Amplats, Implats and Loanmen, as well as the workers, lose billions of rands in revenue and income and forced communities to their knees. AMCU finally accepted the wage offer that would increase the basic salary of the lowest paid workers by 1,000 rand over 3 years, excluding other benefits. The cost of the strike: the mining houses forfeited around 24 billion rand in revenue, and employees lost earnings of some 10.6 billion rand. Another strike followed in July. This time, it was NUMSA, which declared a wage dispute with employers in the metals and engineering sector. The parties settled a month later after the 220,000 NUMSA members agreed to a 3-year wage deal, giving its lowest paid members an increase of up to 10%. However, the strike is not quite settled. Employer body NIASA has refused to accept the agreement, saying its members cannot afford it. It's implemented a lockout, even though the Labour Court has ruled that the agreement must be extended to all employees in the sector. And still with labour matters, tension between COSATU and NUMSA came to a head in November when the latter was expelled from the Trade Union Federation. NUMSA and COSATU had been at loggerheads since the latter's General Secretary Zwelinzi Mavavi was suspended over an office affair, and NUMSA resolved to withdraw its support for the ANC before the general elections. The metal union's decision to recruit in other sectors added to the tension. The move to expel NUMSA could see COSATU weakening further. 7 other unions siding with NUMSA have indicated they will fight the expulsion. NUMSA may also form a political party to contest the 2016 local government vote. The post office strike wasn't as headline-grabbing. Nonetheless, it had far-reaching consequences on people from all walks of life. The crippling 3-month-long strike disrupted postal services and saw mail and parcels pile up at mail distribution centers around the country. The 3 unions active in their sector finally settled for a 6.5% increase across the board. However, Communications Workers Union has indicated it may down tools again in January if the outstanding issues are not settled to their satisfaction. The impact of these strikes, in addition to power shortages, rising unemployment, slowing global growth and declining commodity prices, had a severe impact on South Africa's economy. Treasury has revised economic growth downwards to 1.4%, the slowest pace since 2009. These factors, as well as the widening of the current account deficit and government's ballooning public servant wage bill, contributed to a cut in South Africa's credit ratings. Standard & Poor's set an example in June. Moody's followed suit in early December. South Africa avoided further cuts a week later when S&P and Fitch retained their outlook on the country. Credit ratings are important as they help determine a country's cost of borrowing and influence investor appetite for its debt and equities. This affects how much capital flows in the country and the value of its currency. South Africa's big 5 banks were also in the rating agency's firing line. Moody's downgraded Standard Bank, Absa, FirstRand, Nedbank and Investec following the collapse of African bank investments in August. Able flagged a headline loss of 6.4 billion rand, causing shares to tank. The Reserve Bank stepped in with a 10 million rand recapitalization plan and placing unsecured lender African Bank under the curatorship of Tom Venterbur. Ellerins, the furniture retail from arm of Able, would either be sold off or closed down. In other company news, Woolworths showed up its muscle on the world stage with a 23.3 billion rand takeover of Australian clothing chain David Jones takeover bid. In the second half of 2014, we saw unusual corporate brawls where CEOs of different companies taking head-on their board of directors. Boardroom politics at PPC got the internal management relations into a tailspin. Keto Gordon's departure as PPC CEO sparked a mudslinging match between him and the board and a leadership vacuum that undermined investor confidence. Gordon resigned and then wanted to return to his job, but the board refused. He accused members of being incapable of leading PPC's strategy to expand its operations across Africa. Gordon worked with some shareholders who initially wanted to force a vote to see him return. But ultimately, they accepted another deal whereby some board members would resign and Gordon would be left out of the executive. PPC recently received a major proposal from unlisted rival AfriSam. In another corporate brawl, Marcel Golding resigned as executive chair of Hoskin Consolidated Investments, as well as its subsidiary Sabido and broadcaster ETV. He was suspended for buying millions of rands worth of Alice shares without consultation. He lost his bid to halt the disciplinary action in the Cape Labour Court. 2014 also saw the appointment of Lesetja Kganyago as new Reserve Bank governor after Jill Marcus disappointed many financial players when she announced that she was stepping down at the end of her 5-year term in November. Kganyago joined the Reserve Bank in May 2011 as a deputy governor. The woes at South African Airways and Eskom continue unabated. SAA has been unable to stem its losses, and Public Enterprises Minister Lynn Brown has seemingly been unable to resolve the differences between the board chair Dudu Myeni and suspended CEO Mwabisi Kalawe. SAA has now been moved to Treasury and Nico Bezuidenhout appointed acting CEO. South Africa's power constraints were brought home once again in November after Eskom introduced widespread rolling blackouts. The parastatal blamed the electricity shortages on a collapsed cold storage silo, a short supply of diesel, water, and the weather. The uncertain power supply is jeopardizing South Africa's economic outlook and business prospects. Government has now introduced a 5-point plan to address the electricity crisis. 2014 has seen sporadic industrial action, one after the other. Even though this was done in the interest of workers, the country's economy was the hardest hit. We now have to contend with a volatile currency and many inflationary pressures. It remains to be seen what 2015 will bring for South African consumers, but as for now, 2014 is the year that was. I'm Colin Limawa for SABC Business News, Johannesburg.